It's really something how the most fascinating stories can be right in our own backyard. Today, we're focusing on a place many folks in Prairie, Minnesota know well, the Fredrick-Miller Natural Spring. It's clearly a spot that gets a lot of attention. Maybe you drive past it, maybe you even stop there with a jug. Our idea today is to, well, really get a handle on what makes this spring special without getting bogged down in, super technical stuff.
Exactly. And to do that, we've looked through quite a bit, things like meeting minutes from the local watershed district, Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek, also broader reports on springs in Minnesota, and yeah, even what people are saying in local news and online forums.
Okay.
So think of this as us walking you through the main things you'd want to know about it.
Right. So the mission here is to unpack the key parts. We want to know, okay, where is it exactly? What's the story with the name? What do we actually know about the water? What's the geology behind it all? And what about these beliefs about health benefits? Why is it just such a popular place? Let's kick things off with the basics. Location. Where would you find this spring?
Okay, so the Fredrick-Miller Spring, people often call it FMS. It's located on the east side of Spring Road. That road is also known as County Road 4.
Oh, okay.
And it's about a quarter of a mile north of where it meets U.S. Highways 212 and 169. Pretty easy to get to, which is probably, well, a big reason so many people go there.
Fredrick-Miller Spring. That name sounds like a person, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm curious, did the sources tell us anything about who Fredrick-Miller was? Like, was he important locally?
It's interesting. The spring clearly has his name, but the materials we looked at, they don't actually give us any specific details about Fredrick-Miller himself. It's possible, maybe likely, he owned land nearby or was significant somehow in the past, but that specific info just wasn't in these documents. Huh? Maybe some deeper local history digging could turn something up.
So it's a local mystery for now. The name's out there, but the person, well, we don't know much based on what we have. Okay, let's switch gears to the water. People use this for drinking water, right? Which naturally makes you ask about the quality.
Absolutely. And a really important comparison that comes up in the sources is another local spring, the Richard T. Anderson Spring, or RTAS.
RTAS.
What's pretty interesting is that FMS and RTAS have really different mineral makeups, even though they're quite close geographically.
Different minerals.
Yeah.
And that is interesting given they're nearby. And there's recent testing comparing them.
Yeah, there's mention of tests done since 2021. These tests directly compare the mineral content of Fredrick-Miller Spring and Richard T. Anderson Spring. Now, the exact results aren't in the pieces we reviewed, but the fact they are doing this comparison, it shows there's an ongoing effort to figure out what makes each one unique.
And what about the health side of things? That seems to be a big draw for people looking for spring water.
It really does. There's this idea floating around that Fredrick-Miller Spring has a mineral profile that, well, some people feel supports a healthy diet. It fits into that wider interest people have in natural spring water for, perceived health perks.
So FMS is generally seen in a positive light for its minerals. But the other one, the Richard T. Anderson Spring, that's a different story based on the sources.
That's right. The testing on the Richard T. Anderson Spring, RTAS, has consistently shown manganese levels that are actually above the health advisory limits set by the EPA.
Above the limits.
Yeah, and that's important because too much manganese can potentially carry some health risks.
Okay, so what kind of risks are we talking about with high manganese? What should you know?
Well, thinking about brain function, high manganese can mess with how dopamine works.
Yeah.
Dopamine's really key for movement, mood, that sort of thing. So over time, too much manganese might lower dopamine activity. And on top of that, it can kind of throw off the brain's natural defenses, potentially causing oxidative stress on brain cells.
Wow, okay. That definitely highlights why knowing the water quality is so crucial. So based on that, what's the advice regarding the Richard T. Anderson Spring?
The information points towards being cautious, either finding safer water sources or, if you are going to use water from RTAS, making sure it's properly treated, filtered specifically to remove both arsenic and manganese before drinking it. Arsenic was also a concern mentioned in the Fuller report, though not detailed in the bits we had.
Right, proper filtering sounds key there. Okay, shifting back to Fredrick-Miller Spring, on a more positive note, Premier Water Technologies looked at it. What did they find?
Yeah, Premier Water Technologies, they're a water treatment company. They made a comment that the water from Fredrick-Miller Spring tests fairly well.
Okay.
Which does give some level of, professional reassurance about the general quality of the FMS water.
Good to have that kind of input.
Okay.
Let's think about where this water actually comes from. How does it get to the surface? What's the geology?
So generally, spring water is just groundwater that finds a natural path to the Earth's surface. It happens when water moves through rock underground. The sources bring up the idea of karst formations. These are landscapes, usually limestone, that get shaped by water dissolving the rock. Globally, these are common places for springs.
Karst formations. Interesting. So is that what's under Eden Prairie?
Well, the sources we have don't explicitly say FMS comes from a karst formation, but they do stress the basic idea. Even tiny cracks, little fissures in the bedrock, can be really important pathways for groundwater to move and eventually come out as a spring.
So it's not always giant underground rivers feeding these things.
Not necessarily, no. Often it's more like these complex networks of smaller routes through the rock. The sources also mention that as water moves through rock, it can pick up tiny bits of sediment. If those particles are big enough, sometimes it might make the spring water look a bit cloudy.
That makes sense, geologically speaking. Now, moving beyond just the science of the water, there's obviously a strong community connection here. We mentioned people drinking it for health reasons.
Oh, absolutely. You see it in online comments. People call it a lovely place, a very popular spot. One person even said the water tasted nice and minerally, which again points to those positive feelings about its quality.
And it goes beyond just the water itself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's a real sense of the community caring about the spring's future. I saw something about a potential development project nearby.
Yes, exactly. There's a proposed project called Noble Hill on the Standal property, which is close to the spring. And that has definitely stirred up concern locally. Environmental groups, people who regularly use the spring, they've spoken out against rezoning the land for this development.
What are they worried about specifically? How do they see this development potentially affecting the spring?
The main worry seems to be about potential negative impacts on the Fredrick-Miller spring over the long term, kind of cumulative effects. But the concerns also include other environmental things like losing a lot of trees, worries about soil erosion increasing, and the chance of stormwater runoff potentially polluting Riley Creek. The fact that apparently over 3,000 people signed a petition against the project's permit, that really shows how much the community values this spring.
Yeah, that level of engagement definitely speaks volumes about how important it is locally. So let's dig into that a bit more. Why is Fredrick-Miller Spring so special to people there? It's clearly more than just, H2O on tap.
I think several things come together. Access is definitely one. It's just an easy place for people to go and collect drinking water.
Right.
Then there's that strong belief for some people in the natural purity, maybe the health benefits of spring water compared to, say, city tap water. Like
Right.
that Reddit user wanting spring water just for making tea.
So it's partly perceived quality, partly wanting something more natural.
I think so. And maybe beyond that, there's also just a feeling of connection. Connection to nature, to local resources. It's like a tangible piece of the environment right there in Eden Prairie. And the fact it's called a very popular spot makes you wonder if it also functions as a sort of informal community gathering place, even if people are just there for water.
That makes a lot of sense. Becomes more than just the water source itself. It gets woven into the local identity. Now, what about the history? The sources said it's been used by the community for drinking water. Do we know much more about its past?
The sources do confirm, yes, it has a long history as a community drinking water source. And the mention of the nearby Standal property attracting developers before, that suggests there's been ongoing interest and potential changes around the spring area for a while and continued community focus on keeping it safe. But really detailed stories about its early days or exactly how it became so central to the community, that wasn't really covered in the materials we looked at.
Okay, so we know it has a history of use, but the maybe richer stories are probably outside what we reviewed. All right, so to sort of wrap up our exploration here, what are the main things to take away about Fredrick-Miller Spring?
Well, to sum it up, Fredrick-Miller Spring in Eden Prairie is a key local spot on Spring Road. It's named after someone we don't have specifics on from these sources. The community uses its water for drinking. Some believe it's mineral-rich and good for health, which contrasts with the nearby Richard T. Anderson Spring, where manganese levels have been a concern. Geologically, while not confirmed as karst, it follows the principle of water moving through rock fissures, its popularity. That seems down to easy access, beliefs about water quality and health, and a connection to nature. And the community clearly values it deeply, shown by the concerns over nearby development. Historically, it's long been a local water source.
That's a really great summary. You've definitely taken us from the science of the water right through to the strong community feelings about this place. We definitely know more now than just there's a spring on Spring Road.
Right. And that brings us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener. Think about how these local natural resources like Fredrick-Miller Spring really anchor a community to its environment and how important it is to understand them, maybe protect them, especially with development and environmental changes happening. You might ask yourself, what other places in your own community, places that seem ordinary maybe, hold surprising stories and deep local meaning? It's definitely something worth considering.